Why they should give me because they say they set what my objective objects. They are at home with it. Tell them they should give me, I should spend this kind of money for just 2 days. Are you going to say? That is at the same thing. So we have now there place I come bad now 998. I don't win. No, I don't win that thing before. I don't win something before, so you can't go for less. My own 998.
Oh, yes.
So we come from bad then. Let them know that it's not this one are eating, it's not. We don't want them to
register.
So that's
Yes.
Right.
yes, like we discussed. Oh, since we never had a trust. Two weeks ago. My man's not really standing for office, so boy, this people that say no. But I tell you, but what say people send me message. They don't accept so they don't accept my existence. Really, all the thing we discuss is just like this government, all the thing we discuss is just try and put for trash can. Come on, see, all these things, my brother. Let me be realistic to you. These things, you don't need to move around. Like I told you, boy, like big boy, you can see what thing I've done there. See, there is a concept, there is a school of thought, a theory called doing business with other people's money. It was propounded by Professor Green of the Advocate. What I'm trying to say is, when we launch these centers in partnership with local government, they are thieves. They want where to spend money. They want where to spend money.
I'll give you a pen.
Centers.
You have a pen already.
No,
That's my pen.
no, this is mine.
Oh.
Yes, we should in partnership with office of
Thank you.
Take one.
yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Commissioner for Local Government Achievements Matters. That this foundation is launching. What is it? What did we agree? What did we agree? Said
Awareness.
there's a name we accepted. Yes. Thank you. Yes, transit centers, treatment transit centers. Are you getting me? What they only do is to come to the local government and pick and register their name, bring their pictures of the event. That one will give form data. You get what I'm saying? That one will form data. You know, okay, yeah. So that one will form data. So if you are going for images, then the people, both of them that are dealing on health, MTN Foundation,
So that what we want to do, any patient that has blood sugar registered in hospital.
Yes, finish. You don't need money to do that. You don't need money. Yes.
Please don't call me. Please do it in
Guy, this thing no you get sometimes the people find very difficult. This thing says you have done free, you have got getting information is a problem. So many people are coming. Based on this, we want to decentralize it. Every other government should identify these patients, thyroid patients.
Given 5 hours. Nearly 12 people. Now the number is not coming. You now see the number coming.
I'm coming in. Just
Evening.
So do I join you?
now so.
Like 4 before. Around 11:30. Need to record the. We will start now. Because if you watch it on YouTube, the first 1 hour is nothing. You get so those two, the other ones are yet to join, but I've given them the instruction.
So yeah, Barack Obama Bochi. Yeah, Bochi guy. Bochi guy was in there.
Yeah, call them. Let's see. How many people are there again?
How you doing? Good to see you. Fine, thanks. Hi there. How are you doing?
Welcome.
Hey there.
We're still expected, but we can go ahead.
Okay, it's up to you. But how about at the other places?
We had like 5, but the thing just went down now, and then we have 2 now. So it's going to call them up, and we're going to have the 5 back.
Okay, so we've got Ibadan connected.
Bochi,
and
CCO, Barack Obama, and who else? There are 5 of them I saw. There's Bochi now. Okay.
There's Bochi and
Barack Obama is on now. Then Ibadan. Then there is
would you prefer this? Do you want a swivel chair? Or you want a static chair like that?
Wait, what's this?
Like the chair? Do you prefer this kind of chair?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. How are you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you.
I'm sure you're missing us too. We're
I
missing you already.
I know. This looks good. I like those.
Yes. The whole place looks different.
I know, right? Doesn't it? When was the last time you were here?
2 months.
Yeah.
3 months.
3 months, yes.
Yeah.
So this is a new, new season. The American Center, not a welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
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 Thank you very much. Welcome.
So how have you been? I can't believe I'm leaving. I've been here 2 years. It's amazing. I'll go back to Washington, and then I'm going to retire. Yes, yes. The Department of State, we must retire when we're 65. So I'm almost 65. I am almost 65. Hey, it's good to see you. Good to see you. So you have the message about the budget? I was working on that. But wait, Omawale, what do you think of this one? Isn't it so bright? Now, you guys don't know this, but Omawale knew me in the days when I wouldn't even wear Ankara. It was too bright. But now look. But I was inspired by Omawale because she would wear it, and then one day she gave me a dress, and I thought, oh my God, how am I gonna not wear this dress? That's so rude, you know. So then Omawale was gonna be at this event, and I thought, I just have to wear this. I just have to wear this, right? Because that's polite. I haven't taken it off since. I will. This one I will be. This one's very bright. But Omawale started it, because really, I was too shy, and then to be polite, I thought, okay, to put on that Ankara, you're gonna look ridiculous, but it's okay. Now, I love it. This one, I bought for myself on Sunday. Never mind that I'm going back to America. This was a reward because I came in on Sunday and I worked on grants. So I decided after working, I needed a reward. It looks nice. I just like it because it's so bright. Just now, I was looking at myself and I was thinking, man, I changed in the 2 years that I've been here. Really, in the whole first year, there is no way. Very, you know, very formal, very conservative. I'm great.
I'm ready, darling.
Yes. In America, I won't be able to find it. That's not, but maybe not. Maybe more. I would not. Good afternoon. Thanks.
I want to do this.
Yeah.
He says I'll make a presentation to the European Union head of education.
remember him?
Yes, he's going, right? Do you know that he knows that, right?
There's a Chris.
You're gonna be one of our alumni.
Yes.
I know, I tell this story,
Talk
just
to
what
these
happened.
guys.
I came here. we
I have a
did
mentor,
spot.
Jack Appel.
I met him, what he's
Abino
doing is
Foundation.
really cool. And so then, sometimes
Abino
just
Ma-
out of the
Abino
sky,
Ma-
we get notices of international visitor
Yes.
leadership program opportunities. So I met him and I thought, wow, you would be perfect for
He
this.
just got 70 million.
Yeah. So when are you going?
He's not yet. They've not-
Okay. Okay, but you've been selected, so that's
He,
good.
himself.
This is awesome, sir.
Yeah. The reason why we picked him was that this particular IDLP is looking for people at the grassroots level of government. And when I met him,
There are 6 here.
You should have seen
what's called?
seen this place somewhere. You didn't wonder. God replenish you. Seen everything. I'm a friend on it.
Thank you so much.
here you go, just take the one.
You're not going to come.
Let's do something. Let's do this to look back when we have the issue. Other like 3 or 4 guys. You just juggle, you just talk. And
Okay.
Next.
I think so. Is this good?
If you want to show them, you don't have to film the camera. Whenever you want to talk about this.
Okay, so just, this one is less dark, so. Oh, good. Okay, good. That's distracting, being able to see it.
What's your
Because of this setup, I can't stand up, but I think most of you know me. I have to show off my dress, even in these other places. Okay, because this dress makes me smile. And one of the things that we were talking about, I should introduce myself. For those of you in the other cities who don't know me, I'm Darcy Zotter. I'm the public affairs officer here at Concept Lego. I've been here for 2 years, and as I think everybody in this room knows, I'll be leaving soon. I'm going back to the United States, and then I'll retire. And during my 2 years here, I've learned a lot. I've changed a lot. One of the things that I point out is my wearing Ankara, which when I first got here, I remember looking at women going, whoa, that's bright, you know, thinking, who? And now I embrace it. The other change that I've been made aware of in my 2 years in Nigeria is that frequently I would say to Nigerians, okay, people keep telling me that the country isn't working as well as it used to be. And when they would say that, they meant it from a economic perspective, a social perspective, a security perspective. And so this is what I would hear. And then I would say, okay, what's the problem? And what do you think caused this? And usually I would hear leaders. We don't have good leaders in Nigeria. That's the problem. That's the problem. If we had better leaders, we would be okay. And so for a while, I kind of believed that. And to a certain extent, I would say I still believe that leaders can play a big role. But then as I thought about it more, learned more, talked to more people, I thought, but there's a bigger piece. There's a piece missing to this, and that's followers. So today what we're going to do, I'm going to talk about followership, which starting about a year or so became, I would say in a sense, my passion. So I'm really pleased to be able to share what I've learned with you. When I go back to the United States, I'll be retiring, at which point I plan to turn myself into a full-time activist who will exemplify courageous followership. First thing I'm going to ask you to do is look at this picture. So I think everybody knows him. Who is he? Sure. This is Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think that most people would agree that he was an amazing leader. He inspired people. Even whether I'm in the United States, I'm in Nigeria, I was in Afghanistan, Indonesia, and China, people talk about Martin Luther King. He was unquestionably an amazing leader. But now, today, what I'm going to ask you to do is turn to the other side and look at all of these people. These people are all Dr. King's followers. And I would argue that while Dr. King was important, unquestionably important, Dr. King would not have been as amazing as he was without courageous followers. There's two sides to the coin here. And the thing about Dr. King, he knew it. If you look at his speech, the one that's most famous, I would say, I Have a Dream, in his speech, he's addressing his followers. He talks to them. He talks about when he's up there making the speech, he's not saying I, but he's talking about we. And he says, we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Is he talking about cashing that check himself? No, he's talking about we. He acknowledges the role of followers. But he goes on, because sometimes people don't know, and he realized people didn't really realize what does it take to be a good follower. He goes on and he says, in the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. So he's telling his followers, don't get violent. So what I'm going to do today is first, I'm going to give you a brief history of followership, talk about some of the myths and misconceptions about followership. And because there's a skill, just like I would guess that most of you have probably read about being a leader, taken leadership training, and just like being a leader, there are skills involved in being a follower. There's a lot of skills. And I would argue that just like we can learn to be good leaders, we can equally learn to be good followers. First of all, it starts out, and then I'm going to wrap it up by talking about the future of followers, because I think about this a lot. I think about myself, and I think that in any given day, I start the morning as a leader. I have a section of 17 people, and I'm the head of that section. So I go in there and I have to be a leader. But at 8:30 on the dot, I have to run upstairs where I meet with my boss. And let me tell you, I turn into a follower like that. I am a follower. Because when my boss, he's clearly the leader, says do it or whatever, I try to be a courageous follower, but I'm a follower. Then I run back downstairs and I'm back to being a leader. The ambassador may call me up, or usually he emails me. I am back to being a follower. So when I look at all of you and I think about the other people listening today, I don't know which ones of you are leaders, but I know all of you are followers. All of you must be followers. I can guarantee that. Not maybe all the day, not in every situation, but throughout your day, throughout your week, you're going to be going back between being a follower or a leader. And I'm hoping that by talking about followership and getting you thinking about this, you can become a better follower. So, looking to the history, We've been talking about followers for thousands of years. For instance, Aristotle said, "He who cannot be a good follower cannot be a leader." In modern day times, people began to really start studying followership in the 1920s. And interestingly enough, it was by an industry expert named Mary Parker Follett. She believed that all individuals, regardless of their place in society, deserved respect. She wanted to give more power to individuals and ensure that individuals' voices were not only heard, but were also integrated into solutions. So in the 1920s in America, this was pretty revolutionary, because in the 1920s and for decades, we'd had very much a top-down system. The leader said it, the followers just did it. That's what you did. They said it, you did it. In 1955, okay, I'll just ignore that. Two researchers introduced the idea that leader and follower was not an either-or proposition, in which leaders were found at either ends of the continuum. So they didn't say, okay, leaders, you folks are all out here, followers, you folks are all out here. The qualities of followers and leaders were independent. Then in 1988, Harvard finally started to look at followership. And they put out a paper in 1988 called In Praise of Followers. So it's been kind of a back and forth, and people kind of hear the word followers and they think, well, it's okay if she's a follower, but I'm not a follower. Or, man, I sure don't want my kid to grow up and be a follower. Like, who wants their kid to be a follower, right? Yeah, nobody. Then in 2008, scholars and practitioners actually came together in Claremont University. And that was the first time in the United States, and from the research I did globally, where followership became a field of study within the practice of management, just like leadership has. Now, here are the key points that came out of that conference. Follower is not a lesser role than leader. It's different, but not less important. And I'm going to ask you again to remember this picture. If you ever, for a moment, and I actually keep this in my office, if you ever, for a moment, doubt the importance of followers, take a look at this, remind yourself, and say, what would Martin Luther King have been without those followers? What did it take for this girl to go to that march that day, to hold up that sign? What is this gentleman thinking? He could have been at home, but these followers, these courageous people decided this is a person we want to follow. Follower is not simply a preparation to be a leader. Some people think, like Aristotle said, oh, first you're a follower, then you become a leader. Not necessarily. Or sometimes you might be like me, where you go back and forth in the course of your day, being both a follower and a leader. Being an exemplary follower is not managing up or being political, because I can tell some of you are going, oh yeah, followers. They're the people that go, they're the people that when the boss says jump, they say, how high, how high. That's one kind of follower, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. All people will go back and forth between being a leader and a follower. Most people will spend most of their time as a follower. And the skills of both exemplary leaders and followers can be learned. Now, here's something to think about. Exemplary followers are not passive. Following is not easy. And lastly, the reason we're here today is because exemplary followership skills can be learned. Just as leaderships can be learned, so can followership skills. As you can imagine, when I started doing research into this, there are now 8 key models. There were 7, but now there's another one that's come on the scene. There are 8 key models of being a follower that the research will talk about. And the one that I like the best, the one that I strive to be, and that hopefully, you know, I can encourage other people to at least look into it, is put forward by a guy named Ira Shaleff. It's Chaleff on courageous followers. So this is one particular model of being a follower. Shaleff believes that the follower and the leader play equally important roles. He argues that leaders rarely, think about this, he argues that leaders rarely use their power wisely or effectively unless they are surrounded by followers who supportively encourage them to do so. So for those people who may be thinking, wow, the problem in Nigeria is the lack of good leaders, I would ask you to consider his statement that leaders rarely use their power wisely or effectively unless they are surrounded by followers who supportively encourage them to do so. And we can all be followers. So now I'm going to go through the 7 characteristics of a courageous follower. It's very hard for me to sit down. Okay, I'm sitting here. I want to jump up. Okay, number one, a courageous follower assumes responsibility. The followers do not expect the leaders to assume all the responsibility for themselves and the organization. Instead, they do it. They assume responsibility for themselves and the organization. Okay, so we're not talking to the press today, so I'll just tell you some true stories. Just for myself, because I've worked really hard on being a courageous follower. 1, when President Trump got elected, I was dismayed, a little bit taken aback. Well, forget the little bit. I was very much taken aback. Okay, it's like, holy guacamole, babe. This is not who I voted for. Okay, if any of you are with the press, it's off the record. Okay, so what, is this with the press? Oh, okay. Well, alrighty. I might have voted for him. Okay, I'm not telling you who I voted for. Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wow, this is a surprise. So what do I do as a follower? Now, remember, I work for the U.S. Department of State. We're what's considered part of the executive branch. My job as a U.S. diplomat is to follow what the administration says. Now, as a follower here, I have a couple ways I could go, right? Because I'm a follower. I could go, hey, not my guy, and just do nothing and sit around and complain about him all the time. I could have looked at you and said, you know what? We don't have an Africa policy. So you know what? We're not doing anything. We're not going to work with alumni because we don't really know what we're supposed to do because President Trump doesn't have an Africa policy. And the little bit of an Africa policy he has, Nigerians aren't really liking. Okay, I could have done that, but I talked to myself. Okay, remember, I'm into being a courageous follower. I decide I can assume responsibility. And Chibuke and Samuel and Kester can say this is true. In our staff meetings, we acknowledged that we didn't have a clear-cut Africa policy. We didn't. So what are we going to do? I assumed responsibility for determining what our priorities were going to be. I did not sit around and wait for them to appoint new Secretary of State, new undersecretaries, new assistant secretaries. We only got our assistant secretary of state for Africa 2 weeks ago. I could have sat here for 2 years going, I'm not really sure what we're supposed to be doing, but we didn't. I didn't. So that's an example of assuming responsibility, of saying, okay, don't really know what I'm supposed to do, but I have been doing this. I've been working for the Department of State for over 20 years. I kind of know what President Obama did. I know, generally speaking, what U.S. foreign policy is like towards Africa writ large. I know what U.S. foreign policy towards Nigeria had been. So I thought, okay, I'm going to assume responsibility, and we're going to write and decide what our priorities will be. And we did. And then we're going to go back. The next one, the courage to serve. As a courageous follower, you must have the courage to serve. The follower does not shy away from additional responsibilities and work to facilitate the leader's role en route to their common purpose. So in that one, what I tell people with that one, again, it goes back to, you got a leader. You didn't exactly pick this person, okay? But your goal is a better Nigeria. Your goal, I'm just going to pick my favorite topic. Your goal is electricity, okay, which everybody knows that's my favorite thing. So what are we going to do? I'm going to pull up my socks. I'm not going to make any excuses, and I'm going to work. And I think a lot of you, I know a lot of you are already activists. So I know that I'm already talking to a lot of you, that a lot of you are already doing this. I would encourage you, particularly with younger people, to encourage them to be courageous followers and encourage them to serve. So they've assumed responsibility. They said, okay, now they have the courage to serve. Now this one, I think, is more difficult. I think this one is more difficult even for Nigerians than it is for Americans. And one is the third one is the courage to challenge. The followers do not hesitate to voice their concerns if the behaviors or actions of the leader or group members are wrong. The courage to challenge. There are more effective ways than others, but I would argue you can do this. Okay, lessons I've learned. Okay, I'll just be honest. One of the things that the Department of State traditionally has done is that traditionally we have supported human rights writ large for everybody, inclusive for everybody. But under President Obama, okay, President Obama does not support the rights of certain groups of people. He doesn't support the right of LGBT people, gays and lesbians. He doesn't support the right. Now, I personally don't agree with that. So what do I do about that? So I think about that. I went to my boss, the consul general, and I said, look, I get it. You know, new administration, we're in Africa, it's not very popular anyhow. So I get that we're not supposed to do this. So I spoke up. I did it just one-on-one. I just spoke up to him, and he said, no, we weren't going to do LGBT rights here in Nigeria. And at that point, I had to go, okay, because you're only left with two choices. You either quit or you accept it. But I didn't back down. Another story, because I've always had kind of a big mouth. But anyhow, when I was, because some people say, oh, yeah, you did this because, you know, you were already more established in your career. I was only a second tour officer. And I had a boss that used to yell at us. You know, he'd go, hey, you, and he'd yell at you, and people be like this. They'd get all nervous and stuff. So one day, I was like 40 years old. I don't know where I got the nerve. I went to my boss just one-on-one. Remember, because this is America, and this still is the Department of State. I went to him and I said, you know, I don't think you understand the effect your yelling has on people. I don't think it. So he was kind of mad. His name was Bill Stanton. Bill Stanton was kind of mad. But from that point on, whenever Bill Stanton would get mad, and he'd, you know, we'd have these big meetings, and he'd look at me and he'd go, well, I want to yell, but I know I got goddamn Jiminy Cricket over there, and she's going to yell at me if I yell. And I'd go, you're right. I am. Me. I don't know how many of you know Jiminy Cricket, but he was the conscience. That was me. So I got Jiminy Cricket. I'm like, yep, that's me. So is it easy to speak up? No, it's not easy to speak up. But should you speak up? Yes, you should. I don't think that you need to do it like by saying, whoa, that was idiotic. What a fool he is. I don't think you need to do that, but I think you need to think of ways. Now, what I've learned in Nigeria is this is one very counter to your culture. This idea of younger people or people in a lower position speaking up to the higher person is very difficult in Nigerian culture. I've seen that. I know some of you I've told this story to. There's so many interesting things about Nigeria. One of them, and I know that Chibuke's heard this story. I'd been here like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Okay, so there's these two people that work for me. Okay, fine. And they're all modern, and they're in their 30s, and they're well educated, and they wear modern clothes, and they talk modern, and they act modern, they read modern. Okay, fine. We were in a showboat. Ever been there? I'm meeting this guy. Hello, it's nice to meet you. Some other guy comes in. He just looks like kind of an older guy. Just an older guy, but nothing. Before I knew it, Tosin and Tayo. Tayo's on the ground. Tosin's bowing. I'm thinking, holy guacamole, babe. You know, Tayo must have had a freaking heart attack. Why is he on the ground? And they're like this and this. And I'm looking at this guy thinking, you know, something has happened here and I don't know what it is. Okay. It was just very respectful, modern day Nigerians. This guy was some chief or something, some traditional ruler. They knew it and they reacted. They didn't stop and think. They didn't say, oh, he's kind of a ruler. Should we react? No, they just did it. So I understand that in Nigerian culture, it might be more difficult than it is for an American to courage to challenge. But I would encourage you, And I can also tell you, I'm looking at Samuel, in my office at our staff meetings, people have overcome this Nigerian restraint and challenged me quite a bit. Would you say that's true? Yes. So you can do it. Okay. Before we move on, so right now we've looked at the courage to assume responsibility, the courage to serve, the courage to challenge. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about those? So let me ask you this. Just thinking of your private life, when you've had to be a follower, who'd be willing to give us an example? Because I don't want this to just be all me talking. Who would be willing to give us an example of when they had the courage to assume responsibility? Anybody, any of you guys have NGOs or things like that?
Yes.
Okay, want to give us an example?
Oh, for me, I run an NGO, right? And when I was going to start the NGO, all I had was a passion to make a difference in the lives of vulnerable children. I didn't have the finance, and in fact,
We're talking about being a follower. It's not easy being a wife.
even I was doing a
I would
business.
put it at that. You know, family,
You can do
husband,
this.
wife
You can do all
role.
of this and go into the NGO.
A lot
They
of
didn't
times,
believe it. And in fact, for
a
like
lot of times,
some years, I kept on supporting because
bringing
they didn't believe I could
ideas
leave that
and
to do this.
you know
But
that you are right.
I had to sit back at
But
that time in my
because
life.
of the
What do I want to
leadership
do for the
that your
rest of my
husband
life?
has,
And I had to
at the
answer
end
the
of the
question
day,
sincerely.
you have
So I just had
to.
to face it.
You just
Okay,
have to solve
good,
it.
thanks. So she assumed responsibility. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had situation. Chris is my name. I had a situation in Surulere where I was just strolling on the street, and I saw a naval officer who had an issue with an Okada rider. So the naval officer instructed his boys to arrest the Okada rider, carry the young man, and put inside his boot. The boot was open, and the two raids had the Okada guy forcing the guy inside the army officer's trunk boot. And everybody could not say, was just looking. So I was just looking at the man. I walked up to the officer. I said, even if this young man killed somebody, is it not right that you accord him just a little respect by arresting him, maybe putting him somewhere, calling the police? Of what good will it serve you to put this guy inside this boot? Officer, you tell me.
What did he do?
So the naval officer was disarmed. What he could say as at that time was, do you know what he did? I said, whatever he did, sir, is the punishment. Is this punishment that you're giving him commensurate, or what he did that he scratched your car? I'm not telling you that you don't put him inside the trunk, but I'm telling you that maybe your younger brother or your son, any day, anytime, could be arrested by somebody else and put inside the trunk. I know you will feel good about it. So I said, are you done with the assignment? Why not close the boot. So the naval officer said, bring him out, bring him out. Where's the nearest police station here? I said, Aguda police station, Aguda, Soloki. They now said, you should go inside, bring his Okada. I said, beautiful. So from there, the young man was not pushed inside the boot again. They took him to Aguda police station, and
that's good.
That
okay. So he had, thank you. Thanks very much for sharing. So he had the courage to challenge. He wasn't saying get rid of all the police. He wasn't saying get rid of all the military, but when he saw somebody doing something wrong, he spoke up. That's pretty darn brave. Okay, I'm not sure if I would do that, but actually, yeah. Okay, so that is an example of the courage to challenge. Does anybody have an example of the courage to challenge in a work environment? In a work environment. Okay.
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes.
Some people also from other centers.
Okay.
Who might want to contribute.
Okay. Let's pick one.
Barack Obama.
Okay. Does anybody have an example of a workplace when you had the courage to challenge? Okay, we'll wait. We'll go with you. Yeah. So this is a workplace example of courage to challenge.
Good afternoon, everyone. University of Lagos. A member of the Board of Studies School of Postgraduate Students of the university, and also a Senate member. The experience I want to share happened at the School of Postgraduate Studies board meeting. On that day, we have PhD students, and when they are preparing PhD students for the final exams, which we call the Viva, it's believed that they will come with the supervisor's name. But I have the privilege to know that one of the supervisors retired before that student was being presented at that meeting. The meeting has to be done before the Board of Studies meeting. So the Board of Study meeting is a stamp body meeting that will approve whatever has been done. So at that meeting, I saw the list of names of supervisors, and that our former colleague's name was removed totally. Unfortunately, we have taken one result that someone in the same category of retirement, the department put that person's name, and the board approved the retired professors with the other supervisors, making 3 supervisors. The rule is that if you are retiring, if you are first supervisor, you can be pushed down to 2nd or 3rd. But the department refused to put this person's name. And the Board of Studies of School of Applied Study were like 200, that board. And then I raised up my hand and I asked the question. The rules and regulations of this School of Postgraduate Study, is it for certain people or for all of us? Then if it's for all of us, we've taken results about someone that was retired and the department presented her name and was approved. But this one that we are about to approve, someone's name has been removed. Can anyone answer that question for me? And some of the members said, we did not approve that. Everybody said we approved the earlier one. So the same place I had that day is because we approved similar results that day, where they put the professor's name and they put retired. And this person also has retired. And they removed his name totally, which I think is not proper.
Right, yeah.
And at that Board of Studies meeting, they were instructed to put that professor's name because we have approved similar results. In a situation like that, you have friends, you have enemies. Some came to me and said, Adesalu, but that was not before us. Yes, the department did not present that person's name, but I have privileged information about that department. It can happen to anyone. If I decide to resign from the university today, does that mean that if I've trained someone to the point of going for the final Viva, You are going to remove my name. It's not supposed to be. So I challenged that presentation, and we were about 200 at that meeting. I did that, and I'm comfortable with myself.
Good for you. Thank you. Okay, that's another example of the courage to challenge. Okay, we're going to keep going. Now, so we've got, as a courageous follower, you're going to assume responsibility. You've got the courage to serve, the courage to challenge, and now the courage to participate in transformation. The followers actively engage in the change process in line with the organizational purposes. So, how many of you have ever been in the situation where the supervisors or the leaders of the company come in and they say, okay, now we're going to use a new system, a new online system. People hate change. People hate big change. People hate little change. So they get this new online system. You get half the people that go, forget it, I'm not doing that. I'll let the secretary do it. You get about a quarter of the people who will say, okay, let me work on that. And then you get a quarter that sort of go along with it. But courageous followers participate in change. They embrace it. Like these people, okay? We're going to keep going back to these people, to Martin Luther King's courageous followers. Did they know what it was like to live in a world where Black and white people had equal rights? No. Some of it was a little bit scary. Did they know that they might have to go to jail to form change? Yeah, they did. And it was pretty scary. But they said, we're going to actively participate in change. We're not going to sit here and we're going to drag our feet like, you know, oh, maybe we can go back to the way it used to be. Most some people do that. No. Okay. So I think about this one a lot in terms of Nigeria's upcoming election. The courage to participate in transformation. How are you going to change it? The next one. The courage to take moral action. Followers are not afraid to speak up in a situation where their stand differs from that of a leader's for ethical or moral reasons. So you know the right thing to do and you know the wrong thing to do. And you stand up and you say, that isn't right. That just isn't right. Now, let's go back to what we learned about being a follower. Is being a follower easy? No. Being a courageous follower is not easy. Number 6, the courage to speak up to the hierarchy. Okay, so this is a little bit different from number 3. Number 3 was the courage to challenge. So you might be challenging your own colleagues. Your own colleagues might be saying, oh, we should be doing this. And like you saying, no, I don't think so. But then this number 6 is the courage to speak up to the hierarchy. Anybody want to give us an example of what this looks like? Yes, when you speak up to the hierarchy, to somebody who's clearly above you.
Thank you. My name is Honorable Remy, head of the Council of the Fellowership, and also the chairman of Lagos State Councilors Forum. It happens that in local government settings, the chairman is the #1 citizen government, and then there are ways they have been doing things in the past. But when I came in several more those things according to the books.
Okay,
Now,
so
this one expects.
it's on now. It's on now.
Question you have.
All right, I wanted to give that example on number 3, but I think it fits in more on number 6.
And I told the chairman
I
that
was
I need to
working
call on one or
with
two
the
people to answer some questions. He said, no, you cannot call on any individual. You come and ask me. The chairman, that's not right. So where I had to speak up was when we went to the House of Assembly, because we have quarterly meetings with the House of Assembly where they check the books of the local government. We're talking of public funds here. And every public fund must be scrupulously applied to the intended purpose. So when I stood up to speak, and they called me, leader of the council is your turn to speak. When I stopped to speak, and I read from the laws of Lagos State. You've made my day. You're the best councillor I've ever come across in Lagos State. Speaking up, you even know the relevant law to back it up with. So I had to speak so that they can. And right there, the chairman was corrected. He said, now you listen to us. The assembly, they were telling me, like you said, we have leaders, we have followers. In my own, among the councillors, I am the leader, the speaker of the council. When I leave my office to attend to my boss too, then I become a follower in his office.
Yep.
Him too being the leader of the local government, when he gets to the House of Assembly, he's a follower, he's become a follower. So
Right.
we're all followers here. When chairman, myself, everybody here was a follower. Those are our leaders talking to us. And they told us right there, they said, chairman, you listen. Anytime I call him, he doesn't respond, I should come and report. And anytime I call any of the HODs to come and give account, this is public funds. You can't just sit in your office and say, go and raise voucher. What is it? This public fund I need to use to not to enrich your personal. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so he spoke up to the hierarchy. Now, the last one is the courage to listen to fellow followers. So you listen to your colleagues. You listen to the people that maybe sort of temporarily you supervise, but you listen. The courage to listen to fellow followers. Just to sort of go back, follower does not mean subordinate. It's not easy, but it can be done. Now, one of the things that I've learned is just like what you said, nobody wants their kid to be the follower, right? Everybody thinks, oh, I gave birth to a leader, big leader, big leaders, big leaders. All of my kids are leaders, you know, leaders, leaders, leaders. Okay, fine. But I would say, okay, if you don't like the word followership, which is the word they use in the academics now, but let's say you don't like that word. Think to yourself, talk to other people. You could call them a participant. You could call them a disciple. You could call them a member. You could call them a collaborator, a colleague, associate, or a partner. And there's probably other words, but these are the words that I could find. But these are the other words of followership. I would go back to saying that the whole idea that there are no good leaders without good followers. So we're going to look at this one more time again, because now you kind of have an idea of what his 7 things that courageous followers need to do. And I realize it's very easy for us to sit here and go, oh yeah, assume responsibility. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you might have in doing some of these 7 things. What make them difficult? And then perhaps we can talk about how we could overcome them. And if there's anybody online. So when we say courageous followers have to have the courage to assume responsibility, what makes that difficult to do? Yes.
residence training. So this really resonates with me of being a good follower. For a few doctors that are here doing about other fields, it's a very hierarchical sort of system. So we have the consultant, we have the senior registrar, we have the junior registrar, and we have the health assistant. Most doctors are fresh doctors. But we have created a system where what we use them for is basically not their clinical skills, but to do the mop-up when the senior doctors are finished giving instructions. So I realized, and there was a punishment routine when they don't do the mop-ups, you can just, churn out something and nothing happens. Now, for me, one thing that has been a major concern for me has been the brain drain in the health industry. My senior for industry, and I realized that even we as their trainers, we are contributing to it because we make them feel very inferior as new doctors because we don't even ask for their opinions. So one of the things I did when I became a senior registrar in my unit was that every patient we had, I made sure that there was a young doctor that was primarily responsible for that patient. And one of the things I've noticed about it, that the moment they felt that they could air their opinion, they began to participate in management of patients. They didn't just used to wait behind and let us finish whatever we wanted to do. There was one that happened to me last week that we had a woman that was having a complication in her pregnancy. She was on admission, and we had finished seeing the patient. And one very young doctor that just 2 months post-graduation brought it to my notice that this man's blood group is rhesus negative. All of us missed it on that round. And by the time we spoke to her, we were like, oh, this is our first baby. But we now had to go back and look again. We found out this woman had a surgery 3 years back and was already transfused with a blood that was not compatible with her status. Because of that simple action that young 2-month-old doctor took, the management of that woman changed.
Okay, that's.
To investigate in so that's to say that for followers, when we create an environment where they can express themselves, they get a more holistic approach and they feel more confident in themselves.
Right, and on behalf of that guy, that other doctor, that was an example of him being courageous follower, speaking up to the hierarchy. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, and let's just go back to this one though. What would be some of the challenges? Why might you not? Okay, think about your life. Okay, I'll think about my life. Okay, I'm going back to America to be an activist. I'll just tell you the issue that is most near and dear to my heart is having a living wage. It drives me crazy. Drives me crazy in Nigeria. It drives me crazy in America. When I see these people working really hard, and they never get ahead. They never freaking get ahead. Like the plantain seller people. Well, in the United States, we don't have plantain seller people, but we have people that are working in fast food restaurants. And the conditions are a little bit better than selling plantain chips on the road. But I can tell you, if you're a fast food worker in the United States, you are not getting ahead and you are not meeting your bills and you are just living day to day. So it's a little different. I personally rather work in McDonald's and be a plantain chip seller, but it's the same kind of thing. So it's making a livable wage. That's what I plan on becoming an activist. So when I think about, okay, so like my government's not doing a whole lot about that. Okay, I'm willing to assume responsibility. Okay, some of the challenges that I'm going to face are knowing where to plug myself in, how to plug myself in. Do you know what I mean? Those are just some of the ones I've already thought of. So, but I am determined to be a courageous follower. I am determined that I want to be the change I want to see. So my question to you is, let's talk about what are some of the reasons you may not be able to assume responsibility. I'm looking right at you. For every one of you folks that thinks, Nigeria, it's got problems. I want everybody to channel one problem they think Nigeria's got. And you tell me why you're not assuming responsibility. You don't have to tell me why you're not, but just because we're going to try to talk about those. What are some of the problems in assuming responsibility?
Let me make it.
Yes.
Yes. I think, thank you. One of the greatest challenges we experience if we want to assume responsibilities are the followers themselves, your co-followers. You see, in University of Lagos, in University of Lagos, when I was there, we used to, in our department, we used to come up with an agreement. Immediately we resume for a new session. All the lecturers that will come, they will give you their terms and conditions. How you people will host the lectures. I will come by, the lecture starts by 8, but everybody is supposed to be in the class by 8:30. I'm coming by 8:30. So before, by 8:30, all students must have been seated. So a situation whereby the lecturer defaults and come by 7:30, in her plans to reprimand some students. We had an agreement. This lecture starts by 8:30. Every student is supposed to be seated by 8 o'clock. So you see the lecturer now defy the agreement by coming by 7:30. So in situations like that, you see me in one scenario, one case like that, and I stood up. I said, "Doctor, I don't know if you can really recollect our agreement. Yes, we resumed here on so and so day. This is our agreement," and I read. So you come in by 7:30, and students are coming by 8 o'clock, and you are telling them to go out. Don't you think it amounts to a lecturer defying her own agreement with the student? And you see her say, "You don't tell me when I come to my class."
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that a problem in assuming responsibility is what?
So at that time,
yeah,
you see yourself who wants to defend your colleagues.
Yeah.
And you see other students saying, "Why not see Chris? It's okay now. It's
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah.
Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The lecturer knows that the lecturer knows that she's at fault.
Yeah.
She's at fault.
Oh, but the other people were wimpy.
Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's like,
okay.
It's like our airports. You go to the airport, you will see the delays here and there. Before you know it, one passenger will ask you, "Are you the only passenger here? Are you the only person? Why not relax?" Whereas you have waited from 10 o'clock to 4, 6, 8. All of us will have to move to the plane that today we will enter. And somebody is telling you, "Are you the only passenger here? Keep quiet."
Okay, let's write that one down. That's a good one. Now I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Okay, so let's say you're committed. You leave here and you're committed because Nigeria's got problems, and you're gonna be a courageous follower. Okay. So I hear what you're saying. That's a good point. So his point is, one of the problems that makes it difficult to assume responsibility is all the other followers, because they're lousy followers, because they're those passive kind of followers. They're the followers we don't want to be. They're the ones that go, "Well, it's Nigeria. What can you do?" Well, you know what I mean? Which gets on my very last nerve. Good for you, though. Good for you. Okay. I'm writing these down. Okay. That's very good. Then we'll send out something to everybody, because I'm not sure we have answers to all of these. I mean, I've read a couple books, but I don't think we have answers to all of these. Okay. A couple more examples. I find this so interesting, of problems you encounter in trying to assume responsibility. Number one is the other followers. Okay, so I'm going to pick you back there. Yes.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Yeah.
I know, we've got.
Okay. Are you fine? My name is Zotter. One of the things is the risk involved.
Okay.
To volunteer, the risk involved. Just look at the boys in Thailand that they're trying to save. And one of the volunteers there. Same thing you're doing. And when you mentioned the naval officer that was trying to put on in the guy could have shot him. So when you look at the risk involved, or maybe you want to volunteer for something, your family members will tell you, you want to use your head to pack all that wahala. Because there's going to be huge risk involved. And you might be the one that you're going to suffer for it. Or because you want to volunteer or you want to be the hero. So
Okay.
Suggestion. Reason why.
Okay, I totally agree. So think about that. You want to be the courageous follower. You're going to assume responsibility, but one, the other followers. Two, the risk involved.
Follower.
Back there.
Or responsibility, taking responsibility to be a follower.
What I just want to say is that
Challenges, one of the challenges of being a courageous follower.
Very difficult for a follower
is
for example, if I was once a teacher
and favoritism,
getting to the system, I find out that
politics being played,
when you teach,
whichever place, and
in
rightism.
school, we want you to upgrade the student to pass. Now, I am very passionate in teaching, so I felt after putting all the effort, and at times I don't have sleepless nights, then I will now come back again to add sort of nonsense marks for the student to pass. Then it was normal in that school. So that is why you see a lot of staff not taking that effort to do the necessary thing or to put more effort, which I was doing because I was jumping from one class to another. I'm a math teacher. So I was jumping from one class to another. But at the end of the day or the end of the term, the principal will say, I will upgrade. It's very annoying. You know, you challenge nobody to challenge your previous system. So after a while, you know, you'll be frustrated and you decided to say, as for me, I leave the system. Now, what I'm trying to say is that in that scenario, why do some people were still there is because maybe lack of poverty. That is no job, where to go. So they accept their normal to become normal, and they were just producing not half-baked, I don't know what I would call them, and no baked at all, year in, year out.
Okay, I agree. Now, what he's saying there is one of the difficulties being a follower is kind of, I would use the word inertia. You know what I mean? That you're swimming upstream. Okay, and it's absolutely, positively not easy. Absolutely not easy. But what the literature would tell you to do as a courageous follower, and sometimes you, within your little space, you do what you can. Sometimes you have to quit. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you have to quit. Yeah, you do. You do. Okay, what time are we supposed to finish here? At 2? 2:30. Okay, we've got time. Thanks.
My name is Memuna Kadri. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm talking on courage to challenge. Courage to challenge because, like what my younger colleague said, we have a hierarchy. So in the medical profession, that hierarchy stands wherever, irrespective of who you are. So and we all do understand that the health sector is an integral part of everybody's well-being. But there's that huge deficit from the rural area to the urban area. Everybody wants to be in Lagos. The Ibadan person that is just 1 hour away wants to be in Lagos. So there's that fear, number one, of the unknown. Fear, number two, of what will people say. So that has been a major hindrance in that followership, in the courage to challenge the authority. Because you do not know what will happen if you do some certain things. So that fear of the unknown is there, and of course the fear of what will people say. So you rather stay in your cocoon and deal with the challenges as it comes, instead of challenging the authority. And that is a major hindrance in the health sector that we have today. Because even all the policies that are put in place, we are happy there's a 1% vote to the primary health care, but we are hoping that that will be implemented, because the courage to challenge the authority will definitely be a major problem regarding implementation of that. So that is a big problem that we do have.
Okay, that's another challenge. I'm going to ask us for a moment here, because I agree. So there, in terms of just assuming responsibility, there's the followers that can be difficult, the risk, the inertia, the fear of the unknown. So my question is, where did all of these people come from? Where'd they come from? Like, these are just regular Americans, you guys. Like, I mean, there were over 500,000, well, some people say 1 million, we don't know, but there were hundreds of thousands of people. Now, I'm thinking those people face risk, inertia. God knows, inertia. You had 300 years of not giving Black people the vote. That's pretty inertia. You had the fear of going to jail. You had the fear of change. You had the fear of people around you who were just going, oh, I don't think so. So where did they get whatever it takes to become a courageous follower? Okay, so think about that.
They were tired. These people were tired. They were frustrated. You know, they were not scared of falling again because they were already on the floor.
Okay, so you're saying that these people had gone down so far, there was nowhere else to go. He looks like he's got something to lose. They've got, all of those people have food and shoes and clothes. But why? Yes.
I think I want to have so that they understand that for every action, and this is how the consequences impact you. Nobody wants to do harm to themselves. I'm going to give an example. In my organization, there are challenges with the leadership, and so there's a general sense of apathy towards doing things to move the organization forward. And so I call my subordinates and I say to them something like, okay, so good, you're not being encouraged to perform, but do you know that if you perform, you're building your resume and you're preparing yourself for a future opportunity. So it is in your own best interest to do what you need to do, not just for the organization, but for yourself. Because the consequence is when you do that, you're developing your capacity and you're preparing yourself for opportunities. So when they're able to make that connection, then they realize that, look, I need to get active, I need to do something. And I found that, a recurring thing in my interaction with people, to get them to do things. Helping make a connection between this is the consequence of your inaction, and this is what we need to do in order for us to have a mutual benefit. And once they see it that way and they're able to build that connection, everybody gets it and makes pitches into the world to get things done.
Okay, that's interesting. Yes, Jude. Oh, wait. Yeah. I went to the back. Yeah.
I want to believe that the men here, the masses you see there, were people that saw ahead of their time. They were visionary. They were men and women that needed to get out of the status quo, their comfort zone, and lay the foundation for a greater tomorrow. And that's what I'm doing today. I used to work in a bank. I was on the executive committee of the bank. And we conducted interviews. And suddenly the chairman of the bank said, look, you guys didn't ask the right questions in the interview. And then decided to query every member of the executive committee. And I led the team. I said, no, the position of the chairman of the bank is not professional. We are professional people. And the moment the board begins to interrogate beyond, all of us, on a particular day on the Monday morning, all of us resigned the job. We knew the implication for the bank that was going to bring down the bank. And within 24 hours, the board had to take a decision to reverse their own position. And that kept us. So the point I'm making, service is a sacrifice. And the most sacrificial the service is, it lays the foundation for the younger population. There's need for courage to serve.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so looking at this. Okay, so sort of coming to the end, because then I have one last question. Okay.
Can I also make a contribution? There's something some of the challenges that will cause you not to act.
Yeah.
It depends on, in our context, let me use the word, in our context, in Nigeria, we also have the culture issue. It's a very big issue in Nigeria. There are some cultures, standards that you cannot challenge, even when you know that what they are practicing is wrong. There are cultures that there's nothing you can do about it. So cultural factors too act as inhibitions to not being able to take up a challenge.
Okay, I don't really agree with you. And I would ask you to look at that picture again. And I would ask you to think about the history of the black man in America. And if you don't think, because I'm old enough to remember this, that black people, and there were white people in the audience, that black people getting together and standing up and saying no more wasn't against literally not only the culture of the United States, but against the law of the United States, you're wrong. So I would argue with you about that one. Absolutely argue with you. Yes. You may think you can't, but you know what? That's what I would say, and I agree with some of these people. That's what made these people different. These were 500,000 or more of just regular people. And when you read about the followers, they were just like us. They weren't even as well educated as we were. But they finally had said all of those things they'd been taught their whole life that they couldn't do. They said no. I'll tell you about myself. When I joined the Department of State, only 11% of us were women. I was the only woman in the entire U.S. Embassy, Beijing. And you know what I thought? No. I was the only woman who studied Chinese at the U.S. Department of State. And you know what I thought? No. They told me I couldn't do it. And you know what I said? No. My mother told me I couldn't do it. My father told me I couldn't do it. And I said no. You can do it. You can do it. Yes.
I want to also take some comments and questions. Okay. Yes, I also want to share some views. Part of the challenges that we have. So let's look at the constitutional issue. For example, when we went for our voting down there in Nigeria, had the big like sitting.
Yeah.
So he took us to his office and opened up a website for us to see the expenses
on daily basis within 24 hours when the expense incurred in the mayor's office is published there. So we're not trying to ask him, why were you able to do it and yet nothing happened to your job? The issue was that it was actually constitutional. Because while John Yu was also elected, the mayor was also elected. So but such thing cannot happen in Nigeria. The reason being that the Commissioner for Finance was appointed by the governor. So the Commissioner for Finance cannot publish the expenses of the governor for people to see. If he does it, he will be fired. So for issues bordering on the constitution, it is very difficult for me to take it from here. How many times have we sent petitions or done things to amend these things so that the whole issue will be easier for us? But all these are not happening. So such things can be very discouraging. If I have an issue I want to raise that will help the entire nation, that has to do with the amendment of the constitution, how long would it take? How would I handle it so that I'll be able to achieve my desired result? So that could be a problem.
I agree. I'm not saying that these things can't be problems. But you know, it's interesting for me listening to everybody because I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is really interesting. Really interesting. Because listening to all of you, I would say that probably one of the big differences is that in the United States, I was kind of raised to feel like it's hard, it's difficult, but by God, if I want it, I can work for it. Do you know what I mean? And so we do have that sense. I hear what you're saying. See, when you talk to me about that, I'm thinking, but these people changed the laws. It was against the Constitution. They did that. They did that. You know what I mean? So I would argue that in the United States, we had many, 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 many challenges. We still have challenges. It's certainly not like moving forward. Do you know what I mean? You kind of go forward, and then you kind of go off to the left, and then you can kind of go off to the right. But I am saying that within an organization or within a country, I guess we could say too, that the act that learning about and thinking about being a courageous follower is definitely worth thinking about. Like, think about these people. This was in 1963. You know what I mean? I mean, you guys, I mean, okay, I'm not black, but I read a lot, and I was born in 1954, so I remember a lot of this and how, like, it was just like stunning, and my parents were going nuts, absolutely nuts. You know, that a black person could actually go and drink water where I drank water. My parents went berserk. They just thought that was like against nature. You know what I mean? So you talk about ingrained beliefs. I mean, these were really ingrained beliefs. And I look at my parents, where my parents were, and I look at my own kids, and there's just a sea of difference. So I guess based on my own experience, that I firmly believe, I have to tell you, I firmly believe people get together, you can make it happen. I firmly believe that. Just like I firmly believe that if Nigerians would get it together and just say, we can do this, that you could do it. I think that. I could be wrong, but I think that in Nigeria's future, there's this. You know what I mean? Now, I understand. Oh, okay. Wait, 5 more minutes and we'll go to them. Okay, but wait, I just want to say one last thing. Then we have to go to those people. Okay, just so I can finish. Okay, so I urge everyone to think about what they can do as a follower. Think about yourself as a follower. Followers are a group of members with common interests. So if we decide, let's say we decide, we live here, and we're sick of not having electricity. That's the one. Okay. Personally, I would let corruption, bad health care, I wouldn't worry about that. I'd focus on electricity. That's just me. I'm not Nigerian. Okay, so we decide we're going to have power. By gosh, we're going to have power. So we get together. We are followers, people with common interests. While followers may lack authority, because we don't work for a disco or a genco or whatever, at least in relation to their superiors, they do not lack power and influence. So don't for a moment, because you're one of the followers, think you lack power and influence. Followers can be agents of change. And people, I want everybody to take this picture with you. Followers can be agents of change. Followers ought to support good leadership and thwart bad leadership. And I would argue today with social media, it's easier to do. Followers, think about this. Followers can create change by joining with other followers rather than supporting a bad leader. Think about that. So I'm just going to ask you to take a look at your picture again. Ask yourself if you see yourself there, and then remind yourself of the 7 steps. The courage to assume responsibility, the courage to serve, the courage to challenge, the courage to participate in transformation, the courage to take moral action, the courage to speak up to the hierarchy, and the courage to listen to fellow followers. Okay, so let's see what the people from online.
We have
And now we'll open the
American Corners from Bauchi, Ibadan, City of in Lagos, Barack Obama in Lagos, and Calabar joined us today. They have comments and then some questions. One of them said, this is a question from Barack Obama. How do we become a courageous follower in Nigeria where poverty is at large? That's the first question. A suggestion is one of the challenges of being a courageous follower is politics and favoritism, fear of unknown. Then the next one, what limits us from taking action? My concern is weak economic policies which create high barriers to entry in the financial sector. Another one, okay, you already did it. Leaders don't use their powers effectively because the followers don't give them the courage to do so, according to Darcy. Is it by any chance that the fault of Nigerians for our bad leaders or for them not using their powers effectively? Next one says, I think fear is a limiting factor for us in Nigeria. And then the last two is a question. The question says, in the government setting, there are laid down regulations and ways of getting things done. Some, in quote, government officials disregard these procedures and run their offices like private businesses. As a courageous follower, how does one speak out? Bearing in mind that the system is hierarchical and one may not have access to those that matter. Finally, this from CCO, in Nigeria, followers are not focused on a particular agenda to drive it to a logical conclusion. Followers are divided along many lines, including religion, tradition, culture, tribalism. Hence, we are not able to make our voice heard. How can we work on this and see ourselves as followers in Nigeria? I think quite a number of questions and comments here.
Okay, I'm not going to try to answer these. I'm going to let you guys try to answer them. Okay? I have my own thoughts. But this, I mean, you guys, you're getting ready for the 2019 election. If there was ever a time, politician person sitting in our midst, if there was ever a time where what was that thing I said? Followers, think about this, people. Followers can create change by joining with other followers rather than supporting a bad leader. Okay, so let's go to the question. Poverty and courageous followers. What do you think? I'm going to try to, who hasn't spoken? You haven't spoken. Okay. What's poverty have to do with being a courageous follower?
Somebody will be thinking of Angela Daniel, Women Entrepreneurs Association of Nigeria. The first thing that comes to mind is, if I lose the opportunity, how will I cope? I had experience, I had a bad experience. I worked in this government established organization, and then they were mismanaging the money. I was in a position, I was in charge of reports, and they were always expecting me to falsify the figures, to report that they have recovered more than they have actually recovered, and my conscience could not take it. The first month when I refused to do it, they refused to pay my salary. And so for the whole month, I didn't have money. And somebody was like persuading me, you better do it and collect your salary. You better do it so that they will pay you and all that. My conscience didn't take it. I refused to do it. Second month, I didn't have salary. It was like they were waiting for me to just leave the position. They couldn't sack me. So the third month came and they refused to pay my salary. I resigned and I left without money. I went back to journalism. So while I was doing that one also, somehow, somewhere, it happened that because I refused to do what they wanted me to do that was wrong to me, I entered the office one Monday morning for a news meeting, and they handed over to me a termination letter. I looked at it. Tears ran down my eyes.
Sorry.
It was sad. Very, very bad. I took it. I left the office. And then I went to some of the people that were good to me as a journalist. I said to them, this is what has happened, this is what has happened. To God be the glory, a number of them encouraged me. Don't worry, we'll give you jobs. What can you do? I told them I could do PR job. And so within 6 months of doing that PR job here and there, I had billboards, Lagos, some other states. Within 6 months, I had millions in my account. And I was like, young people must hear. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today. Empowerment of women and girls. Young girls must know that they must not mess themselves up because of money. And I started going to schools to preach to young people. This. There are a lot of opportunities. You don't need to do this, you don't need to do that. I have a book, Life Skills for Adolescent Girls. It's all from personal experiences I had.
Okay, interesting. Now, I have one question about what she was saying. So I hear what you were saying about poverty in Nigeria being a hindrance. So what do you guys think about that? Like, what can you do? Because honestly, I don't know. I mean, I know what the books say. I know what the books say, but I don't know what real life is. Okay, we're going to go, because you haven't spoken yet. Yeah.
I'm African farmer, from African farmer. I've spent about 18 years of my life in rural communities across, and I have an idea of what people call poverty, and I stand to be corrected, but Nigeria does not have a poverty. Why do I say so? People in the urban centers can talk about poverty. Some of us have lived among this. I think the biggest issue we have is information dissemination issue, because how do we justify having over 45% post-harvest losses, which is mostly in the rural communities, and in the urban center we will have in the nation about 60 million unemployed youth. So what that means is that there's just lack of information, and we've tapped into it. Now, basically, we set up an organization about 2 years ago called Farm Crowdy. I designed and co-founded it. And in less than 2 years, it's done almost $2 million from private sector urban funding. Now, it's just coming up with solutions instead of complaining, why don't you design something? That organization cost me almost 40 million naira of trial and error. And in 2 years, when I met the right partner, it went global.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. We know that experience. Yeah. Do you have an education? What if you didn't? What if you're the guy that just graduated from a lousy public school and you graduated in 8th grade?
Now let me tell you a real life scenario.
Okay.
Now there was this talk in Oyo State, in Shaki. It was the major talk. He had numbers of governors, he probably would have his number if he was there. And it was a major talk that you cannot win election without the guy. And suddenly a particular year, his friend who was a politician brought in laborers from the neighboring country and put them in his care to discipline them when they want to mess up. They had over 20. He managed them for a year. No form of education. At the end of 1 year, he gave the politician friend about 2 million naira of profit, and the politician friend gave him less than 100,000 naira. So he said to himself, if I manage these guys part-time and I could deliver 2 million naira after all expenses, how much more if I focus on agriculture, which was what delivered the money? And since then, in the space of 1 year after, he built a house, he's building a second, bought cars. Basically, the people in the rural communities just are not aware of the opportunities they have. And so that's when we say poverty in the rural community. Yes, it's just information. And we've done it in many cases and it's working. And I just stepped into from business to NGO now. And my greatest challenge is the educated people who are saying, okay, so who is funding you? Where are you getting the money? Well, guess what? There's post-harvest losses and nobody is solving it. And so we just created a platform that anybody across the country can get the products online free. And educated guys are challenging me to say, hey, you cannot do it free. And they're complaining. And lastly, I want to ask, most of us who complain, how many of us have genuinely written proposals? I used to be on the other side. We complain about the Minister of Agriculture. I know so much. But the question is, how many proposals have I written that you've thrown into the dustbin? How many have I decided to... Okay,
I'm sort of trying to figure out, what's your point? The person's... So your point is, in response to that question, the question was, poverty makes it difficult, if not impossible, to be a courageous follower in Nigeria. But what your response to that is, there is no poverty in Nigeria. Okay.
Poverty is not the issue. Because the information.
Okay, so your response is poverty is not the issue, information is the issue. Okay, that's interesting. Actually, I think that's interesting. I'm sort of going through my head. Okay, so what did the authors say? In order to be a follower, another sort of subset of being a follower is that you also have to educate yourself. Yeah. I was going to say, it gets more complicated than these 7 steps. I mean, there are these 7 steps, but then there are sort of subsets of those 7 steps, in order to assume responsibility, you have to be do your best to educate yourself. Yeah. Okay. Yes, you have spoken.
My name is Uri Robobo. I want to speak from a public service perspective, and I think basically it's a systemic problem. You know, I used to be an investment banker, and I used to complain a lot about government, about poverty, corruption, and all this stuff. So I said to myself, why don't I be on the other side, work in government, see what those guys are going through. You know, some of the things I've noticed, when people are poorly paid, minimum wage is so low, there's no how, there's going to be, you know, it's going to be corruption, it's going to be poverty. But imagine someone earning 60,000 who has 3 kids.
But I would disagree with you. I would say Sonny Abacha was not poorly paid. So you explained to me why he was
I'm
so
talking about
corrupt.
people who are in the civil service now.
Just saying.
So he was the president, right? And he was calling on.
There's a lot of people like that. So okay, I have to take exception. This is something I've read a lot about. I would have to.
You're generalizing.
I know, but I would have to take exception to people are corrupt because they're poorly paid. Actually, I could show you a lot of data. That's not true. That's not true. It's an excuse. That is not backed up. Your assertion is not backed up by research, global research. Just want to say that. I've been doing this for a long time.
What poverty does?
Wait, he's talking. He's talking. Wait, no, let him talk. Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I won't totally necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
Because what I was saying is that, you know, like I said,
these people have to pay their school fees. These people have to eat. These people need to also, you know,
shelter, pay for rent, and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So how do they cope with this? Yeah.
Right.
And inflation.
Okay,
let's be practical.
So they should just have one child.
I want to stay in Ikorodu, for instance. When the cheapest place, how much is the rent? And like 25,000 every month.
You know what? You have to say, I'm just saying that, I mean, we can argue about this. Yeah.
What I would say in that aspect is contentment and discipline. You got to be disciplined.
It's a motivating factor.
Some of my friends, if I want to live the life that some of my friends are living now, but maybe tomorrow they just look out for my house. The situation that I am today, I'm comfortable.
Yes.
But you see, some of my friends, their grandfather was the position that I'm presently in. And what I mean by that, there are some that are born with silver spoon. They don't have to stretch it too much. In fact, their first place is 3-bedroom. They have started with a room. And I'm still moving with those people. And the same thing when you have your children now. They will have friends that will go to Canada today, Canada tomorrow. If it is their goal, they will have money to send my children. They should know this. They should
don't forget that even that is the goal they are talking about. 5K.
See, I'm giving you an example.
I don't think this is as cut and dry as we're trying to make it.
Right.
You
Right.
cannot have the benefit of research. But anecdotally, we've seen that there is a close connection between poverty and corruption. And this is why.
I have to tell you, you're talking to the woman who lived and worked in Indonesia, lived and worked in Afghanistan. You are simply not correct. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
In our environment,
Yeah.
find themselves growing up in that mindset.
Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And so the natural thing, even psychologically, for someone in need is to grab and hold. And that mindset is what drives someone like Abacha,
Yeah.
who finds himself in a position of leadership, has opportunities available to him, and still decides to empty the treasury and steal the money.
I hear what you're saying, and if you have any evidence of what you're saying, I would be happy to look at it. I just spent there's lots. There is literally years and years of research. Folks, I just have to say this. sometimes Nigerians act like they're the only country that's ever had corruption. Whoa, whoa. We deal with corruption in the United States. Hello. Yes, we do. We've had our politicians with hundreds of $1,000s in cash in the refrigerator. You know what I mean? Hello. Lived in Indonesia. Whoa. Worked in Afghanistan. Makes corruption here look like babyland. Okay, so I just want to disabuse you all. Nigeria does not have a lock on corruption. It doesn't. It's not the best. It's not the worst. Okay, and I would say, if you look at the Philippines, okay, ask yourself this: why in 1972 did the Philippines, Taiwan, and Nigeria were economically in the same place? Look at them today. Ask yourself what went wrong. Do the research. Read it. Okay, I have. Okay, so I would say that I hear what you're saying, but I would also argue this is a problem. If you're willing to just sit there and give me anecdotes in the face of research, do you see how emotion is trumping facts? That's a problem. That's a problem.
And I have to do this question.
It is a problem.
So, I live in Ikorodu.
Yeah.
I run a non-governmental organization in Ikorodu, and we work among the poorest of communities. I want to say that corruption has a kind of institutionalized thing, and that is why you find out that it's not the amount people are getting, but there's corruption at every level. You know, at every level. Even the person who is selling petrol will want to, like, you know, rip you off. And if you go to an office, before your file can go somewhere, you want to get something. If you don't tip, then your file goes nowhere. It's a kind of institutionalized thing. And the truth of the matter is that there's so many people in the private sector who are not as well paid as the people in the, you are saying minimum wage. There are people that are not even anything close to that in the private sector. Take example schools. I'm opportune to be a director of a school in Ikorodu. Some teachers earn 15,000 naira. You understand? But what they do is that they look for other things, they acquire other skills to support themselves and their families. But you discover that there are people in the civil service, level 16, who are still earning so much and are yet corrupt. So this let's disabuse our mind that it is because of poverty. We need to get this institution of corruption out of our system as a nation. So that's that.
I was going to say the research would support what you've said. I mean, it's not, the research is not just based on Nigeria. I admit that. But the research globally, global research on corruption would support you.
I just wanted to add a little into a question that was asked so that I wouldn't have to talk again. There was a question saying, how do one speak up knowing that the system is hierarchical?
Yes.
So I want to add a discussion to that. Like I told you, I am a director in a school. So last week I was in the school and one of the teachers came to meet me, that the school administrator, she had an issue with the school administrator, that all the teachers wanted to meet me. And I said, all the teachers, I hope everything is okay. They said, yes, but they would like to see me. So that she will speak on their behalf. So they all came, including the school administrator. And they explained what the issue was. So sometimes when you're thinking, okay, I'm a follower and I cannot speak, that's your leader also have a follower. I mean, that your leader is also a follower to somebody, most likely. And so you can look at how you can access that leader of your leader, so that at least you can let your voice be heard. One way or the other, let your voice be heard. That's what I would say. So you discover, and that's why even all of us are in institutions, we can find a way of letting people, you know, hearing people's voices. That's why in banks today, you have customer, they want to hear your opinion and all of that. And I see a lot of it in the United States. When we were in the Humphrey School, I didn't know that evaluation was so powerful, but it was so powerful in the United States. It is not only the leaders that are evaluating the followers, but even the followers evaluating leaders. We were given evaluation forms. I didn't know that those things, they actually use it. In fact, they had to remove one of our one of the people that were handling us in the Humphrey school because of evaluation. So she had to go and do a course in the Humphrey school. So evaluation is very powerful there. And so that's one thing we also need to incorporate here. So it's not just top down, but sometimes you know, put them up. You need to hear what others are saying. So, and finally, I looked at the picture because you asked a question.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, all of those people, they responded to a leader's vision. You know, he was very passionate and all of that. But maybe not all of them actually understood the vision. But they're like, oh, yeah. So his friend said, come on, we're going over. And you're like, yeah, let's.
They believe in somebody.
Don't think that everybody here even understood what the vision was.
Yeah.
Because actually, that last week when they all came, and I was two of the teachers that came said, honestly, I don't know what I'm here for.
Yeah.
I was just told that we're coming.
Yeah.
So because when I asked them to talk, they said they don't know, they didn't understand what the discussion was all about.
Yeah.
So all of us are followers. Understand the vision properly so that we can follow it.
Yeah, okay, her point is well made. And the other thing I would add about what she was saying is, are you going to be a courageous follower every minute of every day? No. But do I think that many of these people, some of them were just like you, like they're like, I mean, I personally been in many demonstrations, and some of it was just fun, you know, some of it was just fun, let's go. Others of it, I really felt strongly, like I'm really here to make a stand, you know what I mean? So I agree with you. So I agree that not every person there was a courageous follower. I absolutely agree with you. I think, though, that some of them afterwards or even before had to be. You know what I mean? Like some of these people had to take off work to go. Some of these people went back to, they're from Alabama, and they had to go back and stand up for what they believed. I totally agree with you. Do I think that everybody is going to be a courageous follower every day of every week? No. But here's what I do think, what it's changed. I'll just speak for myself. How it's changed my mindset, this whole thing of followership, as I said, like my current leadership in America isn't exactly who I would have picked. Just saying, you know what I mean? So what I've learned is, okay, so what can I do? So my research and trying to educate myself and talk about followership was in response to my own self, and I can't even tell you how much it disturbs me. I mean, I cried for a month. My own response to my situation in the United States. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not good. So what am I going to do about it? So that's where my own search for learning about this came from, because I have to be a follower. You know what I mean? I don't get to be the leader. So do I like just throw in the towel and go, as we say in America, do I just go, well, it sucks. You know, here I go, next 4 years. You know what I mean? So that's where it came from. But I totally hear what you're saying. Totally and completely. Do I think there's any simple answer? Absolutely, positively, not at all. Not at all. I think it, you know, like, okay, so I'm leaving in 3 weeks. And I think if the one thing that I would like Nigerians to get from Americans is just that in America, right or wrong, because we have many problems, is that in America, as you guys were talking, okay, I think the big difference is just a sense of hope. You know what I mean? Like in America, we really have a sense of hope. Like we can do this. We can be courageous followers. We can get it together. We can make social change. I think Nigerians can do that too. I personally think you can do that. You can do that. And like, okay, so there's Clemson and there's Chibuque. And I'm always saying, When's the tipping point going to happen in Nigeria? Just what you said. When are Nigerians going to go, you know, this is too crazy. I'm not putting up with this anymore. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. But I think that there, you guys have an amazing country. It is really, really, there's so many good things going on here, except for the no electricity, which drives me nuts. Because I read The Guardian this weekend. It's very disturbing. Okay. But anyhow, that's the only thing I think Americans have more of a sense of hope than Nigerians. I don't know if that's true, but that's my so that's where I come with the whole courageous followers thing. For me, learning more about this gave me personally, just speaking personally, more of a sense of hope. Like I can change things. And I think we'll stop there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And anybody wants to share research, just be my friend. Okay, yes. I just have to tell you this. One of my most favorite things to do about giving talks is all the research. All the research you do in front of them. And there's a good book, to your point. It's put out by the World Bank. It's called Culture Matters. That's the name of the book. And when it came out, it was quite controversial. Why? Because these authors, and it was a compilation from the World Bank, they argued that culture does matter. You know what I mean? Simple things, like, for instance, like being on time. Timeliness is something that matters. And there's this trust. There's a whole host of things about that. And there's a lot of research, actually, out of the Philippines, China, Japan, most of the countries are Asian countries, about corruption, what causes corruption, what you would call a quote unquote sustainable level of corruption. Okay, so what they know is, like, primarily researchers, different researchers, what sort of generally agree is that you can sustain about a 10% GDP level of corruption. Countries can sustain that. There's not a country in the world that doesn't have corruption. But once it gets above a certain level, it does in fact have a negative effect on economic development, economic, social, and educational development. But it really, the link between poverty and corruption is rather tenuous. Give you an example. China, they are not poor people. They are not poor people. But since the government changed, corruption's blossomed. Not because they're poor. The people are richer now than they ever were. But corruption is more of a problem now than it ever was. The Philippines okay, so there's only been one country in the world that ever said to the United States government, we don't need any more money, and that was Taiwan. Okay, but in the 70s, in 1972, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Nigeria were pretty much at the same place. So you look at the difference, what happened. The Philippines went downhill a lot, but it's gone on an upward trajectory. But it wasn't because people got wealthier. People started to get wealthier, and then the things started to shift. So I agree with you. The research would agree with you. Not that I agree with you, but that in fact, a low standard of income does not lead to corruption. Doesn't have to. There are many countries where that's not the case. It's not the case. Yes, we're done. Yes.
Free homes,
Okay. Okay, so that's it, you guys. But thank you for coming to talk. This is my, like, what do I like talking about? I love talking about this. I read about it a lot. Okay.
Please, can we put our hands together for Darcy? How many of us have really benefited today?
Yeah, we have.
Why are you pushing me away?
I don't know. I hope it's something to think about, like particularly with your kids and things. I want you guys to go and I just can't stand it. I just want young Nigerians to go and say, you know, I can change this. I can change this. I want young Nigerians to say, you're a stupid leader and I'm not supporting you. And I want young Nigerians to get on their phone and say, Bob is a stupid leader, we're not supporting him. Just if I were Nigerian. But I'm not. I'm leaving.
Okay, that makes it easier. This is the first program we're holding in the new remodeled American Center. So you are the first group of people to come into this place. Yes. If you were here some months ago, it was not like this. So we've given you Biro from the American Center. We also have something for you at the back for you to remember today. There's a presentation from the Humphrey alums. Please come over. Please, we are going to be having series of programs, and we encourage you to please invite your good friends. Over to you, sir. Very quickly.
Not from Humphrey.
What? From where?
United States government exchange Alumni.
Oh, you didn't give me the information.
Our umbrella. I'm sure everyone here is on that platform, right? So just quickly, it's difficult to believe that Darcy is leaving, eh? Hello? I'm sure you are as emotional as I am, that she's disengaging. Very difficult. But it's the reality we have to live with. Listening to her, sometimes you wonder, why a diplomat? That ended up in the university.
Yeah, well, sometimes I'm not as diplomatic as I'm supposed to be.
Her methodology, her presentation, the details, the perspective, so rich. And we're very grateful. I'm sure we all know that during her tenure here, our association, the Umbrella Association, for the very first time, bringing together all the exchange programs together for the very first time, as a major accomplishment. And she has been very untiring, giving us all the support, documentation, advice, always there. You send Darcy an email. Within seconds, you're getting a response. She's forthright, to the point. Sometimes the response may not...
Forthright, not rude, forthright.
Sometimes the response may not be favorable, but she responds to issues, and we're indeed very grateful. It's difficult to believe that you're living, I will call her a grassroots leader. Grassroots, because each time she's on a platform, because she has been part of one program, one project or the other, she has been there live. So much time you have invested into our association, our various projects. So on behalf of the association, we just have a token.
Just a little token.
Thank you.
We are grateful.
We have just some local thing because we know you like local fabrics. I do. Yeah. So there's a bag made of local fabric.
Wow.
And there's a local traditional Yoruba ashoke.
Wow. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You'll be in the middle. You'll be in the middle.
Okay. With my bright dress on. Thank you so much.
For she's a jolly good fellow, for she's a jolly good fellow, for she's a jolly good fellow. And so say all of us, hooray! So say all of us, hooray! She's a jolly good fellow.
We announce to those.
She's a jolly good fellow. And so say all of us.
Thank you.
So,
thank you. 1 minute. 2 for her enemies.
So for the American Corners, we thank you for joining us today. We hope you call us another time. Bye.
Bye. And I hope my opinions didn't squish anybody.